His work focuses on the interplay between forest governance and naxalism on one hand, and Adivasi rights and conservation needs on the other. His writings have appeared in The Hindu, The Indian Express, The Wire, Sanctuary Asia, RoundGlass Sustain, Seminar, Journal of Bombay Natural History Society, and many other natural history and wildlife journals. He has also contributed essays to edited anthologies. Raza currently works as a consultant with the Ashoka Archives of Contemporary India, Ashoka University. He is the recipient of the New India Foundation Fellowship for 2020, under which he will be writing a book tentatively titled The First of the Nine, The Story of Palamau Tiger Reserve. That's all about our speaker. Over to you, Raza.
Hello, thank you so much for that introduction. My talk is about this very interesting landscape that is East Central India. A lot of you might be wondering, what exactly East Central India implies. So this is the map of East Central India as I understand it. It basically includes all of Jharkhand, Odisha, agency-tracked areas of, Andhra Pradesh, Gadchiroli district in Maharashtra, northern Telangana, and southeastern parts of Uttar Pradesh and southern Bihar. So this is one of the largest, as you can see from the map, this is one of the largest contiguous tracts of forest in India, mainland India. You have, they span over across multiple states, and you have various forest corridors connecting larger patches of forest. And it also happens to be a insurgency affected area. So this is the Government of India map of, that was taken by the Peace Institute studies of the rebel affected areas. And you can see it almost completely matches up with the landscape map that I had shown previously. So, I've given you the introduction about it. This area used to be a huge, it was very popular in terms of shikar back in the day. Not much among the British, but especially among the local landed gentry, because you could find large number of big cats as well as large and medium-sized mammalian fauna. This landscape is also home to many indigenous Adivasi communities with their distinctive cultures. And, it is the site of a lot of land, forest, and resource-related conflict. You would keep reading about, conflict related to mining, industries, infrastructure projects that usually are usually located in this entire landscape. So coming to the Adivasi communities, if you look at if you look at the definition of who is Adivasi, it is basically what the Constitution defines as the scheduled tribe, and each state notifies its own scheduled tribe. So we have 32 scheduled tribes or Adivasi groups in Jharkhand, 42 in Chhattisgarh, and you can see the list. It is worth noting that sometimes Adivasi group or a scheduled tribe that might be a scheduled tribe or an Adivasi notified Adivasi group in one state might not be so in another. So, for example, Bhuiyas in Odisha are, to my knowledge, notified Adivasi group, while in Jharkhand they are part of the scheduled caste. So there is a bit of an overlap, in that sense between the Dalits and the Adivasi. But yeah, some of the major tribes are Gond, Baigas, Oraon, Santhal, Mundas, Hos, Kond, Kharias, Kharwars, Durwas, Pardhis, Tauras, Juans, and many more. So, when it comes to Adivasis, nature, forest, wildlife, they form an integral part of their entire cosmos. This particular photo is of a Sarna ceremony that is being performed on the occasion of Karma festival, which is a major festival, tribal festival of Jharkhand, where the Karam tree is, it is venerated by the Adivasis. But if you go across different Adivasi landscapes of East Central India, you'll find many pantheon of gods. For example, this is Thakur Deo, or it's a very old archive photo taken by Verrier Elvin, the famous anthropologist. And this signifies the supreme high god of the Bhumiyas. Bhumiyas are basically a sub-clan of the Baigas. And the Adivasis, the Baiga Adivasis that you usually meet up with in the landscapes of Kana and Bilaspur, they are usually Bhumiyas, or they identify themselves as Bhumiyas. So among the two, if between forest and wildlife, I would suggest that forests are much more important to the Adivasi way of life as of now compared to wildlife, and the reasons are quite obvious. Apart from the faith-based, cultural, and spiritual importance that the forests have and various trees have, they're also central to their economies. Their livelihood via Hindu, Mahua, the non-timber forest produce, various forest fruits and other, tradable commodities that they obtain from the forest. They are a major source of livelihood, sustenance. Then, they provide grazing ground for the cattle, water for fields, their home repair and construction material, the rocks, the boulders, the mitti, all of that, the mud, all of that comes from the forest. It also provides additional food security in the form of roots and tubers that you'll find a lot of Adivasis who will, apart from their staple diet, they'll augment their diet with these wild fruits. Then it is a very important site of ethnobotany for them, that is study of traditional medicine. So, whenever they have certain ailments or diseases, the Adivasi will first prefer to, treat it using his forest herbs rather than going for, allopathic medications. It used to be a huge challenge back in the day to get Adivasis to adopt to allopathic medication for certain life-threatening diseases. There's a very nice chapter by P. Sainath on it in his book, Everybody Loves a Good Drought. Anyway, and apart from that, it is a space for recreation. Recreation could mean just roaming around in the forest, and it also includes hunting. Hunting, which has been an integral part of Adivasi society. And, as we'll see later on, it continues this day. So, talking of some of the faith-based, memories that I have, interaction that I have had with Adivasi communities, this is my friend Surena Singh. He's a Baiga or a Pahan. Now, this Baiga should not be confused with the Baiga tribe in central India. This is here, the Baiga means literally the priest. An alternative term is Pahan. So he is the Baiga at a village called Kotam in Palamau Tiger Reserve. And he, in the second photo, you see him pointing towards this hill, which is known as the Kesara Hill, which is in the heart of the Tiger Reserve. And that is the site of a Adivasi deity known as Kesara Chandi. So this is the deity at the top of the shrine. It is, as you can see, it is a very simple shrine. It's just a couple of rock stones, and the Adivasi community will come and pray here. Some of you might have read my essay in the Seminar magazine on conservation in central India. There I have narrated the entire story of Kesara Chandi. It basically, just to give you a short introduction, it basically is that he's a tribal deity, Adivasi deity, who looks over all the villages that you can see. As you can see, at the bottom photo is the Kotam village. So all of the villages that you can see from the top of the Kesara Hill, Kesara Chandi is the protector of all of those villages, and the tiger is its chief enforcer, so as to say. And so if the deity is pleased, it will accept offerings from the Adivasis in the form of spadha, which is buffalo calf or goats that the tiger usually consumes. And if the deity is displeased, then the tiger will, it is said, as narrated to me by my friend Surenaji, that tiger will roar. And if you can hear the tiger roar from atop the hill, that means that great miseries are about to befall the villages. And so then the Pahan must rush to the hilltop and get the, try to propitiate the deity. So this is Jharkhand coming to maybe Chhattisgarh and eastern Madhya Pradesh, where the Begas form the major Adivasi communities. As they're quite well spread in Mandla and further east into Achanakmar Tiger Reserve area, which is basically Bilaspur. So here you see the Bega conception of a god is basically what they call as the Nanga Begin and the Nanga Bega, which basically means the nude Bega, the first foremost Bega and the Begin. And they sort of then created mini gods, or you can say high gods, who would look after the day-to-day affairs of the community. In Hindi, we call them Devta. So, Thakur Dev, whose shrine we had just seen a few images back, is the lord of the villages. Dharti Mata is the lord of the land. There is the Khalasin, which is the lord of the festivals. Dulha Deo is basically the lord of the married home hearth. Paniharin is it literally means, Paniharin means a lady carrying water. So Paniharin is the goddess of, water sources. Khut is basically comes from the word khuta, as in putting a pole into the ground where the cattle is tied around it. So Khut is the god of the cattle shed, and Baghesur. The Baghesur part is the god of the jungle, who is represented, as we'll see, by a tiger. So you can see this is sort of the rough sign that is made to the various deities. It was all taken by Elwin. Much has changed since then, but still it is interesting to look into it. So Baghesur is one of the primary forest gods of East Central India, of the Begas and the Gonds. Both of them will pray to them, though they have slightly differing origin stories of the god. Gonds, for those who might not be aware, are found across Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and further east into western Odisha, and a few of them here and there in Jharkhand as well.
Raza, I think you got muted.
Oh, sorry. Where did I get muted?
I actually muted you, sorry, accidentally.
Okay, so where was I? So Baghesur with, so they're worshipped by both Gonds as well as the Begas. And Baghesur is the, he's the disciplining god, so to speak. He is the enforcer. So when any Adivasi used to err, he was the one who would enforce the discipline of the rules, so to speak, which included punishments as well. So, if you promise an offering to him and you fail to deliver, a tiger would come and eat you up. Sometimes it was also believed that, which is as is a common belief system among the Adivasi communities, so they could get the Baghesur to bewitch others. So these are a couple of very interesting stories that Elwin has narrated, where this is the story of one gentleman who said that if the crop in his Bevar was good, he would give Baghesur a goat, a pig, and chicken. Bevar basically means, for those of you who might be unfamiliar, is the shifting cultivation as practiced by the Begas. So the term that they use for it is called Bevar. If I, and he said that if I cut the crop without this offering, you may take my body. Unfortunately, despite having a bumper crop, he failed to deliver and was carried away by a tiger. Similarly, Dehra Bhumia, a Bega was, a Bega tribesman of the Bhumia subclan, also, found a good piece of jungle, decided that he would clear it for his Bevar, and then, he would offer a cock. Unfortunately, he forgot to give the cock, and his son, 12-year son, was taken off by the tiger. So the Begas would believe that the tigers are, the death, or at least they used to believe, was in their belief system, that death by a tiger is sort of painless because it comes quick. And as one of the Pahans told Elwin, that the shadow of a tiger is so powerful that it stupefies the victim and he doesn't suffer any pain. And there was another very important ceremony that they had to then conduct for any individual who was killed by a tiger, both the Gonds and as well as the Begas, which was called the Matti Uthana ceremony, where the Bagesur would come onto a human host who would then have to be propitiated so that the tiger does not kill other Adivasis in that area. So, wherever there was a lot of tiger trouble happening in that area, you would build a Bagesur shrine and pray that, he delivers you from the troubles of the tigers and other predators. And he is believed to live in the bush or a tree. And just like, it was supposed to watch several villages. I must add that this particular belief system of tigers taking away people, or, if you disobey the gods of the forest, that might be quite harmful for your health. This happened very recently in Palamau as well. A very dear tracker friend of mine, Tomar Singh, he apparently during a camera trapping exercise promised, tigers were not being sighted in Palamau for a very long time. And then there was a camera trapping exercise happening a few years back, and he promised at the Kesara Chandi shrine that he would make some offerings to the shrine if he got a tiger image in the camera trap. After a few months of praying, he actually did get a tiger image, and he was quite happy about it. In fact, it came from the hillock, from that same region of Kesara, on that same hillock. But unfortunately, he forgot to, or at least that is what the other tracker friends of mine who were great pals of his tell me, that he forgot to come good on his offerings and went home one day and suddenly passed away without any illness or any warning. So it is what it is. So as I said, it is a disciplining God, and not just, he enforces other sort of disciplines as well. So for example, if this is a tiger mask that is born during certain festivals by the Munias, used to be, I think this tradition has sort of died out now. But yeah, so if you sort of fell in love with a girl of or a boy of another Adivasi group, and you eloped or married, the Bagesur would come down and enforce the endogamous rules of the Adivasi communities. So you're not supposed to intermarry, or at least that is something that is frowned upon. So then, this is a particular narration that was narrated to Elvin as well. And he said that, the Muria boy, Muria is a subclan of Gonds, and he married a Binjawar girl, and then the tiger started raiding him, and eventually Bagesur Pat spoke to him in a dream that you have married a Binjawar girl, although you are a Muria, so a tiger has eaten your cows and will soon eat you. So the next day he offered 2 goats to Bagesur Pat and 1 to the village, and then he was fine. Then there are other sort of faith systems that are related to wildlife. This is the magic monkey, or basically the langur that was put up at Adivasi houses to ward off the evil eye. So if somebody had bewitched people were falling in your home without any rhyme or reason, you put up this magic langur and get the pahan to bless it, and then you will be fine. Similarly, elephants, though, are not found in central India, or at least are not found for the past 200-300 years. The last record was from 1600s. But anyway, Begas, there's a very interesting, or used to be a very interesting trend of we usually associate riding an elephant with the groom riding an elephant, but here the case was that some sort of a rough elephant using hay and various sort of baskets and stuff would be built, and the bride's brother would actually ride out and meet the groom or the groom's family that was coming for marriage outside, riding on this elephant. Then there were all fun and games as well. The Adivasi children's, all their games are usually based around nature and forest and wildlife. So there is this Kanda Khel or Kandabadi Khel, which is basically that they would try to imitate a forest village. The kids would imitate a forest village. One kid would act like a husband, another wife, another would act like a house help, and then they would go around building a village using various playing different, and the body would sort of represent the various timings of life in a village. So, and this is, I've talked about Begas and Gonds in central India. This belief in tigers and, they being enforcers of wrongdoers and being high gods. This common theme across the Adivasi groups of East Central India. The Kisans of Palamau, Sarguja, Jashpur, they used to worship the tiger demon, who was said that, if you did so, your domestic animals would be safe from cattle raiding. Santhal Parganas Santhals were so deathly scared of tigers that they would actually swear whenever they were called to courts. They would actually take oath in Santhali on a tiger skin or leopard skin and promise that if they were lying, they be eaten by tigers. It is unfortunate that tigers have been extinct in the Santhal Parganas for a good maybe 100 years. The Juangs of Odisha, Hos in Singhbhum, Khons and Kans in Odisha and Andhra Pradesh, they all also swore oath on tiger or leopard skins, making that same promise that if I lie, may a tiger come and eat me. This tradition is also in the northeast, the Sema Nagas, which is one of the sub tribes of the Nagas. The others are Angami Nagas and others. They used to fight on tiger tooth. Though anthropologist John Hutton has observed that back in the 50s and 40s that many of them, they did quite happily, because by then the tigers were becoming rare, so the chances of getting eaten by a tiger were quite few, which is something that I think a lot of people in East Central India would relate to now. So this is a couple of Vegas with their tasseled peacock feathers that were used in traditional dances and stuff. There is another very interesting story I want to narrate, and I'm sort of focusing on these stories because this is something that is not usually talked about in conservation discussions. But there's a very interesting subclan among the Gonds, which is known as the Kusro Gonds. And these also have origin stories of Bagesur, which would remind you very strongly of the story of Mowgli, perhaps. So it basically is that, of Kusru's wife gave birth to a tiger's whelp. Tiger cub, and he was regarded as the firstborn, and they had then human children as well, but he was the favorite of them. And then Kusru, one of these days, Kusru was the Nilgais and Sambar used to raid Kusru's crops, and Kusru could not do much to prevent it, something that again a lot of our forest communities will relate to in areas which have significant wildlife. So one of these occasions, when he saw a large sambar destroying his young and tender urad plants, Kusru wept and tore his hair, bemoaning his bad lot. Then Kusru's tiger child killed the sambar, tore it to pieces, and when doing so, till Kusru's crop were gathered. And thus, this tiger child became the most beloved of all of Kusru's children, and the descendants of this, child, or the descendants of Kusru, whose favorite child was a tiger, became the Kusro Gonds. In fact, it is also believed, one of the alternate stories is that Kusro Gonds, the high priest of Kusro Gonds, could get man-eating to stop, and that is why, and that was that Bagesur was so impressed by this that he actually promised the Gond, this particular clan that tiger would never kill any of its members, and thus he became the supreme god. But that all of these, you have to remember that all of these belief systems does not mean that they would not, they had nothing to do with a dead tiger or a dead, wild animal. If a tiger was killed, maybe if they had not killed it, maybe somebody else or some other Adivasi community person had killed it, they would not mind consuming the meat, or in some cases they could kill a tiger but not consume a meat. It varied. There were even, deities such as, Bagdeo, where if a family member was killed by a tiger, you would sort of, they put up a image of, the tiger, the Bagesur, inside the house and pray to it as Bagdeo. And if you did so, at least you'll be safe that no other family members will be killed by tigers. If it happened, if you die of a snake bite, then you put up a cobra, deity and worship it as Nagdev. Dulha Dev is a very interesting story. I think I referred to it earlier as well, that he was basically a young Gond boy who was killed by a tiger on his way to a wedding. So basically, the Dulha Dev and the Dulhin, Dula Dulan basically means bride and groom in vernacular. And they became the household gods. They were sort of separated in life, but became united in afterlife, and have since, showered their blessings upon newly wedded couples' households and are supposed to reside there. And while you don't get anything out of them as such, you don't offer prayers to them, you do worship them so that they are not displeased by you, because if they get displeased, then the married household ran the risk of getting injured or killed by a tiger or snake or what have you. So there were other cases, something like there was what was known as the Oltava, which is basically the concept of a were tiger, that some humans or some Adivasis um, who had the capability of becoming a tiger. It could happen in two cases. Either they knew the charms and spells to do so, or in some cases, if a tiger had killed a particular human, it was said that his spirit would ride that tiger and guide him to future. It was a malevolent spirit, and it would guide the tiger to his future kills. So if you had a man-eating tiger, a lot of times the Adivasis would not go to kill those man-eating tigers, and you had the Britishers come in, and officers from other departments come in to kill them, because of this particular belief that it was not a tiger but rather the spirit of a dead kith or kin, who was malevolent spirit, who was doing this. And in case if they accidentally killed that particular tiger, they would further annoy the spirit, and that would be much more trouble for them. So this is that. There were other belief systems that if you hear a tiger or panther roaring in the jungle, you don't mention its name. That is something that my mother will relate to as well, because whenever whenever it's evening time, she will always tell me that you never call a snake by its name Saap, you call it Rassi. So this is something, belief system that is also shared across India by, in South India as well. Sanderson, G.P. Sanderson, the famous big game hunter, elephant hunter, he used to write about that, the Adivasis of that area would, when they were going through a tiger forest, they would actually call the tiger a dog or a jackal. And they believe that by giving, such a derogatory title to a proud big cat, the big cat would actually clear the way and leave them safe. There was Chitwar Deo, which is the godling, much like the prince, much like the leopard is. Sorry, it was the snakes. So Chitwar here means a lot of snakes which are spotted are called Chitwar, which basically means speckled. And then there are other belief systems that were around, it revolved around wildlife. If you heard a particular bird call, then you are get eaten by a tiger. If you have a snake or a jackal cross your path, then go back, because your luck won't work that day. So all of these things. Then there is that natural history knowledge of Adivasis that is so incredible as such. The Baigas could identify or at least their pantheon had 17 tigers. Some of them are obviously like the Khunta Bag these are magical creatures, but many others are actually what they saw in the forest. Shade Bag, the white tiger, as you would know, white tigers were not unheard of in central India. In fact, Riva is famous for that particular white tiger, Mohan. The cattle lifting tiger was called the Dor Bag. Singh Bag, although Elvin calls it a horn bag, but basically I believe that it is basically what the memory of, it was a memory of the lions of central India, because central India had lions right up to the 1870s, and this was Singh or lion, and that memory had been passed down through the generations. So they knew that there was another bag. There was Tendua and Cheetah Bag. The two are different because the Britishers also sometimes, differ and call them as grass leopards and tree leopards. Basically, one is the smaller leopard, which is said to roam around the villages, and one is of the more thicker build, which is said to live in the forest. Sonchitti Bag probably referred to cheetah. Then there were many others, hyena, this, that. And then very interestingly, they also have right from the big cat to the smallest of animals. They had 21 varieties of rodents that they could identify, right from different types of squirrels to even what is probably the tree shrew, which was known as the Bandar Chotia. So, I mean, you can imagine the kind of knowledge that we possessed. Then there is another aspect to wildlife and, Adivasi communities, which is in the form of totem animals. Totem basically means They are emblems of your particular clan, your ancestry, how you came from, say, where you came from, and they have a lot of very interesting stories related to it. Some of you might have heard some very common, Adivasi surnames such as Tirki, Kerketta, Kujur, Kinda, Khalko. At least they are very familiar to me, being a Jharkhandi. Khakha. So all of these are very familiar, and all of them are either associated with a particular wild animal, or tree, or a fish, or a grass, or any sort of natural world entity. And then there are very interesting stories. For example, the Kujur, a very common surname in Jharkhand, they are basically the descendants of the date palm. So it is said that the date palm tree, when the earliest ancestor there was sleeping beneath a date palm tree, the date palm wrapped him in a protective cover, and so they followed the date palm. The tortoise Ekka, which is also a very common surname in Jharkhand among the Oraons, that is basically means the tortoise. So the ancestor of Ekkas went to take a hunt a tortoise, and it came around with so all of these are very interesting stories. I'll just run through these, and then this is something that is regarding the tigers and all of this. This is, I mean, it goes on and on and on. These are the bison horn Marias of Bastar. I'm interested to note that there are no bisons in Bastar anymore. All of them have been hunted out. So it is very natural that given all these, belief systems, it would be a lot of people tend to say that Adivasis and wildlife have always coexisted. They have lived, in harmony. But I mean, as we'll go into further into the discussion, the question is whether we can equate co-utilization of habitat or cohabitation of habitat where wild animals and Adivasis shared their jungle homes with coexistence. There are two quite different terms. So Adivasis, as you would know, are hunting as an essential part of their tradition, and the attitude towards hunting is very well defined by this quote that Elvin presents, which I think would be equally acceptable if you were to go and ask an Adivasi hunter today. It reads basically that, but our minds are never satisfied without wild meat. Even if the government were to make 100 laws that we were not to hunt, we will still do it. One of us will keep the official talking, the rest will go off to the jungle and get a good fat deer. They kill sambar, black buck, barking deer, hares, leal, that is nilgai, cheetal, mongoose, peacock, any sort of game that they can come across, green pigeon, birds, all of that. So all of this was happening, and then eventually what came was, with the Britishers came the reservation of forest in 1878, and with that, overnight the Adivasis became, either they were summarily evicted from their ancestral forest homes, or they became encroachers in some cases in their original forest homes. N number of restrictions were imposed on them. The different classes of forests were made: reserve forest, protected forest, village forest. The act was further refined in 1927. Then we come to the 1970s. Wildlife Protection Act comes in. The protected area network or the regime comes in. Project Tiger comes in. There is further exclusion, further marginalization. One of the important points to note is that many of the protected areas that were created, the settlement of rights, which was mandated as per the law, was never carried out properly. So the communities got a short shrift there as well. Then Project Tiger was launched. That is Kailash Sankha and Karan Singh launching Project Tiger at Corbett. And so that is what was happening in the conservation part. Then when we talked about the at the same time, from the 1970s, there was a very remarkable movement over Jal Jangal Zameen, which literally translates to forest, water and land. The consciousness of rights, that we have inalienable rights over our forests, and that we were historically wronged by the government, successive government, first the British, then the post-independent government, and assertion of rights. This is something that was developing from the 70s onwards, and it goes on, and it eventually culminated into the enactment of the Forest Rights Act in 2006. Now, if you look at the Forest Rights Act and the general Adivasi, consciousness around Jal Jangal Zameen, it is basically against large-scale diversion of forest, be it for mines, dams, roads, infrastructure, monoculture plantation that the forest department often undertakes. And FRA, in at least my opinion, and this is something that I think needs to be looked into, or people need to think over it, is that it has been a very important tool in countering such diversions, and has been much more effective than Indian Forest Act, Forest Conservation Act, Wildlife Protection Act, and Environment Protection Act, which are usually easily co-opted by the state, precisely because the agency of clearing or giving clearances rests with the state, which has its interest in getting that project clear. Whereas in FRA, the agency, at least legally, the implementation is obviously shoddy, but legally that agency rests with the people. So it is, and then it is also important that it can be a very important conservation tool, because most conservationists of forest departments only focus on very few handful of tiger reserves or well-known protected areas. But active, we have about 700 wildlife sanctuaries, 106 national parks, 51 tiger reserve, with 2 more on the anvil, 200 conservation reserves, 100 community reserves, and we have so much of protected area. You can count on fingertips, or maybe a few fingertips, the number of protected areas where active conservation work happens. The rest of those purely known PAs, most of us don't know their names either, forget knowing where they are. When diversion or forest or denotification is happening in those areas, we won't even get to know of this. But in here comes the local Adivasi communities or the forest dwelling communities, who will be the prime movers of resistance against such diversions. And this situation is even worse when it comes to what is known as the territorial forest, that is the forests which are outside the protected area region. There also, it is the Adivasis and the allied organizations that protect the forest. There are plenty of examples. The Vedanta Bagmara mining project in Sonakan forest, which is abutting Barnapara sanctuary in Chhattisgarh. Barnapara is a very rich wildlife habitat, one of the surviving few wildlife rich habitats in Chhattisgarh. There, that was sort of squashed due to local protests evoking FRA. Bodhaghat hydroelectric project in what is now Indravati Tiger Reserve. If that were to go through, hundreds of square kilometers of prime Indravati forest would drown. We have all heard of the Niamgiri conflict, the Niamgiri struggle and the conflict around it. But few of us know that Niamgiri, if you look at it on the map, you'll find that it is bang in the middle of Karlapat and Kotgal wildlife sanctuaries, which are very important wildlife habitats in central Odisha. If Niamgiri, you were to start mining Niamgiri, you would basically snap the connection between central and southern Odisha forests, a very important corridor. Similarly, the Polavaram project, irrigation project that on the Godavari, that will sort of that is always in the news. Few know that it will down the very wildlife rich. I mean, it is overhunted, but still. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So Polavaram will sort of drown Papikonda National Park as well. This is in the agency tract areas of Ashoka forest, that is much in the news. We had a 300-kilometer march of the Adivasis going up about. Few understand that it is the easternward extension of the Jaanwar Tiger Reserve. And if Hasdeo was to go, basically all the most important connecting link between the wildlife tiger rich forest of Madhya Pradesh and the wildlife deficit tiger extinct forest of eastern central India, Odisha, Jharkhand, that link would be snapped. In central, there are protests against mining in northern Odisha, central Odisha. You would have read up about it, heard in the news. They are very important connecting corridors that connect the tiger reserves of Palamau and Simlipal and Satkosia, and via Saranda and northern Odisha, Sundargarh and all these forests, as well as the corridor between Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha through these forests. Then, a lot of us do talk about conservation, but I guess very few of us can claim to have actively, or should I say actively, gone to a protest where people got shot. But Adivasis can sort of have that sort of sacrifice that they have made, which is in Koil Karo project that is happening, that was supposed to happen in Singhbhum, that would have snapped the connectivity of Palamau with Odisha. So in all of these, there is one common feature that you would notice is that conservation organizations are completely absent. It is just the Adivasis and the rights activists and the FRA groups that are working and toiling hard. So while it is true that these struggles are not because of wildlife conservation concerns, it is because of protecting the forest and the livelihoods and economies of the people. The byproduct of these struggles are that the habitat is conserved. And even if you have hunted out wildlife from a particular habitat, if the habitat survives, there still is hope that there can be a future revival. Um, so, um, so why has Jaanwar been absent from the Jal Jangal Zameen debates? Well, one very obvious answer would be that there is no material utility of wildlife anymore for the Adivasi. I mean, you imagine him pre-independence or even post-independence when hunting was legal, that he could do all sorts of stuff with wildlife. He could sort of, freely, eat wild meat. Then there was a concept of shikar, which involved beaters, and you could have. It is difficult for us to fathom, but you could have as many as 1,000, 1,500 beaters marching through the forest in a circle, driving out forest for the Britishers or the urban city hunters who would be sitting on their matans, pointing their gun, and they would earn good money out of that, because these shikar, the shikar camps used to last about 15 days, 20 days. So it was good earning for them. Then consumption of wild meat. Then they could sell or trade in wildlife produce because it was legal back before 72. So there were a lot of ways of either directly consuming it or earning livelihood through it. All of that was extinguished as soon as the Wildlife Protection Act came in. Crop raiders, for example, that were causing financial losses could be freely eliminated. But now what happened was that after the Wildlife Protection Act, it outlawed all of these hunting activities, the Adivasi or the forest dwellers were left with the question of, what is the use of wildlife for me now? There is no alternative income to be had from wildlife or consumption. I mean, there is consumption in terms of illegal hunting, but there is risk of that as well. Plus, the number of wildlife animals are declining. So anyway, that is a very high, is a very low reward effort. And as I mentioned, tourism, which can make a dent in the economy, is limited to a handful of PAs. You have so many PAs across India. You can name on fingertips where tourism actually dents the local economy. So then there was the problem of conservation being antipathy seen, wildlife becoming the mascot of the state, and conflict with local communities, who had conflict with wildlife, and basically the creation of protected areas that restricted their rights. That anger over restriction of rights and denial of rights, that boiled over towards wildlife. So they might not hate wildlife per se, but because it began being seen as the reason, the raison d'etre, as say French, so for their misery. So the anger that was actually directed towards the state got channeled towards wildlife. People started killing wildlife or driving them away. And then there is obviously the historical and cultural roots. Adivasi uprising. The Adivasis are known to be a very proud people. They don't like outside interference, people telling them what to do, what not to do. So that plays as well. That also explains why Maoists have taken root in this area. So now we come to the empty forest part and how and why of it. This is the map of if we compare from 70s, which maybe is some baseline data, to present day. Back then 9 tiger reserve, now 51 plus 2 on the annual. And you can see that the decline in tiger numbers. This is the census figures. I know this. I mean, a lot of you would argue that census figures back in 72 and now are not comparable because of the methodology. But still, I mean, this is something, and I hope you can trust me on this, because I have also read a lot of shikar literature, and the numbers based on how many animals were being shot in those periods seem to more or less add up. In fact, I would say that the 72 estimate was a considerable underestimate compared to what the actual numbers were. But anyway, So you can see that while the numbers on Madhya Pradesh and west of it have been retained more or less, the east of it, Bihar, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, this is where the numbers have crashed. If if you look at the data, it basically goes something like this: 70 in 72 during the first census, 2021 functionally extinct. Basically, 2021 I'm seeing functionally extinct, but tigers have been functionally extinct in Jharkhand for about 20 years. In Odisha, down from 326, a high of 326 and 66. And this method was, Odisha census was done very well by S.R. Chaudhary, very meticulously done. So it was a much more reliable figure, down to 2530 in today. If you look at Chhattisgarh, this is down from, I've separated the census figure from United Madhya Pradesh, or what is now Chhattisgarh, down from 57 to 157 to about 20 odd animals, and again functionally extinct because the tigers in Bastar right now are basically migrants from the Chandrapur Tadoba landscape, and they have no prey base in Bastar, and they either eventually get killed or vanish off into thin air. So yeah, and if you look at the tiger distribution map, this is from Sankla's map, and this is the current WI map. You can see the complete disappearance of tigers, the dots from the central Indian landscape. One of the major reasons for the lapses is the communal hunting that goes on in this area. And this is something I want actually people to read. So we have seen the intimate connection that the Adivasis have with wildlife, nature, and forest. But that doesn't, or at least in the present scenario, that hasn't necessarily translated into conservation of wildlife. And there's a very famous anthropologist by the name of Raymond Hames, who has studied a lot of done a lot of studies on wildlife conservation among tribal societies across various parts of the world. And this very paper, there are three key features that I see in this. One, he says, is that conservation is a matter of performance and not intent. You can have a conservationist ideology. You can have, a very intimate connection with wildlife. It is related to your pantheon. It is related to your folklore, culture, all of these. And those are very interesting, as you say, very interesting psychological questions, very interesting field of study. But it is the actual hunter's actual treatment of the deer that matters from a conservation point of view. If the deer is killed, if deer upon deers are killed, no matter what your belief system regarding that deer might be in your faith, the actual fact of the matter would be that the deer would eventually go extinct from your forest. And similarly, the ideological approaches to problem of conservation tribal society, this is something that the rights group, I feel, are affected with, where they sort of unilaterally believe that conservation by Adivasis are, a lot of epithets are given there: natural conservationists, born conservationists, they know best, and all of those things. These come from an ideological position. They necessarily don't translate into reality on the ground, because you'll find that some Adivasi communities, for example, as Nitin gave a very good talk last time, Soliga, for example, in BRT might not have negatively affected wildlife, but say, for example, in Palamau, all of the tigers have been wiped out by hunting, or other wildlife as well. So why this happens, why conservation works among one community, why it doesn't work in another, is never made clear. And we just go with a blanket statement, no, all Adivasi communities know how to conserve their wildlife. So coming to the communal hunts, there are tons of communal hunts that happen across East Central India. In Dalma Singh Bhum, the Bishum Shikar, there is Sendra in Santhal, which is one of the 6 Santhal hunting festivals. Akhand Shikar in Mayurbhanj, Phagu Sendra among Mundas, Paraz or Vijaveta among Bastars, Durvas have killed Kedkul. Then there are multiple Kales in Bastar, Gadchiroli, Tika Pongal in Vizianagaram. Then there are Peror, Gondos, Kadavas, Wangs. Everybody has their own hunting festivals. There might be multiple hunting festivals. A single festival might last for 10 days or for 1 day. It is all very variable. And there were some rules, but as we have seen from Elvin's time to today, a lot of it has been diluted. One of those has been that today all of these hunts are basically a kill-all hunt. You kill anything that you find. And now there are some graphic images, but I think they're important to show. So these are some examples from the hunt that happens in Western West Bengal. tiger that this was killed in Medinapur, the first to turn up in 100 years in that landscape. Tigers had been extinct from that landscape from 1901, I believe, when the last record of tiger from that area had been put on paper. And this was the first tiger that turned up in 2018. It was soon killed by the Adivasi hunters who were on a hunting festival. You can see that, be it a fawn of a barking deer or an adult barking deer, eggs, chicks, mongoose, woodpecker, common squirrel, nothing matters. Anything and everything that can be eaten is consumed. Jungle cats, kittens of jungle cats, foxes, pups of foxes, monitor lizards, cheetal deer, uh, tons of birds, anything and everything will be eaten up. And this is important to know because, as I say, that it is not about food security anymore. I mean, food security aspect could have been true in these days, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, where protein intake, the primary source of protein intake was wild game meat. But today, the animals are so few, the hunters are so many that sometimes there are 100 hunters and everybody would get maybe 1 teaspoon of meat. That will be divided among them. Sometimes they will get nothing, they just go for the thrill of it. So it is not about food security. And plus it is also important to remember that not to tar the entire Adivasi community with the same brush. So hunters form a minority among the Adivasi community. Most of them will not engage in hunting these days. They will rather go for their settled agriculture and cultivation and all of these things. As you know, hunting is outlawed both as per Wildlife Protection Act as well as the Forest Rights Act. And then the changes among the Adivasi communities that have that make this not about food security anymore, and all the ritual changes that have dilution rituals, all of these are basically because of the the rise in settled agriculture, sedentary living, proliferation of cheap broiler meat. You have integration of villages now. Even the remotest forest communities, which back 10 years ago I have seen, 10, 15 years ago, which were very remote, are now well connected with roads. You have mobile phone towers everywhere. Even the remotest of villages where one could never think of, people would have to walk 20, 30 kilometers to convey a message. Now they have smartphones, I have seen. So there is solar electricity, and so there is a lot of market penetration. And then there is obviously the problem of wildlife trade as well. That bushmeat hunting also is, wildlife trade becomes a byproduct. Casual bushmeat hunters will put a trap for a deer or a wild boar or whatever, and they will accidentally catch a tiger or leopard or any other prized animal. Then they will sort of try and sell them. Pangolin is a very good example of this. Pangolin trade is often driven by bushmeat hunting. These are some examples. Pangolin. This is a particular leopard that was trapped in a deer trap that was set in Girdi in Jharkhand. This, incidentally, was the first leopard to be recorded in that area in about 35, 40 years. Even the Adivasis of that area said that they had never seen a leopard before in 30, 40 years in that area. The first one to turn up there, God knows where he came from, dead. Then there is, similarly in Dalma, you can see a jungle cat, wild boar. So Dalma hunt also is basically an extension of the West Bengal hunt, or the West Bengal hunt is the extension of the Dalma hunt. This happens in the southern part of Jharkhand. And again, all of this is the result of the hunting. Wolves, anything and everything goes. And the forest department is completely helpless in such a situation. This is a very evocative image which was basically an ACF of forests was pleading with the hunters, a group of hunters in West Bengal, to stop the hunting. Unfortunately, it did not work because, you can imagine when you have 40,000, 20,000, 30,000, 10,000 people marching into a forest, no forest department, or forget forest department, no policing department can stop such an influx of people. And you can't prosecute everyone either. Everything is killed. Small birds, assortment of birds. This is a tortoise. Civet cats, fishing cats, mongoose, hare. Anything and everything goes. Similarly, this is the Vishu Sikar Sindra in the Seraikela, Kharsawa, and the southeast Jharkhand, southern Jharkhand landscape. Then again, here also you have 50,000 hunters will march into the forest, kill anything and everything they can get. Deer, barking deer, jungle cat, peacock, And this is what the forest department basically does. You will have droves of forest guard who will be called from various forest divisions. They'll stand there and they will do some ceremonial confiscation of a few traditional weapons, and that is it. Nobody is booked, nobody is charged. In fact, which is, I think, a good thing. In recent years, what the forest department has tried doing is, and this goes against the usual caricature of the department being an all-pervasive demon that harasses Adivasis. It is true in some cases, it is not true in other cases, where the forest department actually set up camps to distribute medicines and food among the hunters. The hunters would, after toiling through the forest, they would come to the stall and they would get some food, free medical checkup, and all of that. And it was hoped that through these efforts, year after year, there would be a change of heart. And this is something which is, completely correctly describes what happened in these hunts. This was written in 1958 by D.G. Sharma, who was an ACF in Bastar at that time. And he writes that you can see many villages combined together. He's describing the parad in Bastar. Many villages combined together and do thorough beating of the forest by haka, setting fire to the forest, putting nets and snares. No rules regarding the numbers, sex, legal state of forest, methods, axe, muscles, guns, muzzle loaders, everything is used. Any animal is killed, be it a tiger, bison, central Indian wild buffalo, panther, bear, and sometimes the tiger would become man-eater if it escaped. Bastar had a lot of man-eating problem back in those years. So you can see that this problem of a kill-all hunt goes back quite a bit. And then apart from these, you have the bushmeat hunting, which is basically everyday hunting that goes on. This is on the left is a very common sight that I come across in my forest. You will have a sturdy, nice Adivasi man walking around the forest with a beautiful set of bows and arrows, and he will take whatever he gets. These hunts, when I say bushmeat hunting, it necessarily does not have to be an individual. It can be an individual, they'll go in groups of 5, they'll go in groups of 10, 15, 20, it can be anything. And again, anything and anything, everything is hunted. This is a Chosinga fawn that was killed, and the guy took a selfie. So you can see that these people have now, the technology is coming in. They have smartphones. They have, this is a bear that is being consumed in Jharkhand. They're taking selfies with them and all of that, and yet they're continuing persisting with hunting. This is also very interesting. This is from in Papikonda in Andhra Pradesh. Here you can see a gaur has been eaten up. And this is something, this is the site where the gaur had been killed. And you can see there are 2 beer bottles, what we call in our area, Firangi, Videshi Daru or Angrezi Daru, which is basically, bottled beer. That was consumed by the hunters. They had a good time. They ate up the bison. They'll eat up cook up whatever they can get. You can see these seizures, the rare seizures that sometimes happen. This is an eelgai, this is meat, this is a cheetal, sambar antlers, bison horns, and whatnot. Hyenas are eaten up, bears are eaten up. These 2, unfortunately, are Chosinga fawns that were killed by hunters. Chosingas, as you know, are quite rare, and in Jharkhand especially so. And then again, even the common things. Here is a hunter, with a sack full of squirrels that he has killed. For, it won't really affect his protein intake, but just for the fun of it. A civet cat, And then this is a very interesting. In Bastar, the situation is so bad that you won't even find langurs. In fact, as far back as 1967, George Schaller wrote that in West Bastar district, communal hunts by tribal people in extremity to destroy the wildlife were large areas so completely that even monkeys are rarely seen. This that you can see, the image on the right, is about, they say about 500 to 1,000 langurs that were killed off and chopped up and dried in Rajnathgaon district in Chhattisgarh, which is in the Bastar landscape. And this is what it looks like. Kids start at a very young age. They'll take their bows and arrows, their gulails, and they'll go and kill whatever they can get. They'll march with their hunting dogs. They'll go with their air guns, muzzle loading rifles, so things like that. And this is not something that is only limited to Central India. A lot of friends of mine who I've talked to about this say that, and who have worked in Northeast India, say that reminds them very significantly of the situation in Northeast. The set of tigers spiked on a is a scene from a Naga village in 1960s, taken by Balkrishna Seshadri in his book Twilight of Wildlife, published 1969. Nagaland, as you would know, tigers are extinct in Nagaland and have been so for a long time. And you can see why. And you can see, you can remember as far as 1940s, Hutton was saying that tigers had got very rare. So the same Nagas would not mind biting a tiger tooth and lying. And you can see what was happening. And this is something that continued even today. These two tigers were, the first to appear in Nagaland in a long time. They were killed off quickly. The image at the bottom left is basically of a tiger hunting exercise that happened in Arunachal Pradesh. This is from I think the late 1980s. Himalayan black bear has been topped off. Ginseng, I think a handful of us would have, or perhaps nobody of us would have seen one alive. This is a village market in Arunachal Pradesh. You can see the amount of wildlife that has been poached and hung up. And yeah, I mean, baby barking deers, hornbills, takin, Sumatran rhino, which is extinct and one of the most critically endangered rhinos, was found in the Indian territories of Northeast, especially the Naga, Manipur, Mizo Hills, and was poached to extinction. And so, for conservation to occur, this is a very important quote, that hunters must understand the relationship between hunting and game depletion. We are not passing here a moral judgment on the act of hunting itself. That is not, we are no one to decide on that. At least I believe so. I mean, we have our own eating habits. X person can have his own eating habits. The problem occurs when it happens to such an unsustainable level that you end up causing extinctions. Yes, we should aim towards eliminating hunting, but it is also practically impossible to perhaps completely eliminate hunting. What we can do is that ensure even the best of parks in India, the most well-protected parks, the most thriving parks in India, have their share of hunting that goes on. But because the hunting is, or the offtake by hunting is so less compared to what the animals naturally reproduce, the wildlife thrives. And this is also brings me to the fact that given all of these, a lot of people may get worked up and think, oh, all people are, these enemies of wildlife. It is not. There are cases where people have also coexisted with wildlife, or I wouldn't use the term coexisted until there is enough research, but cohabited with wildlife, and they have not negatively impacted wildlife. In fact, in some cases, they have even actively protected them, such as the Bishnois in Rajasthan. The Mishamis of Dibang, Sanjeev Sahil Nijawan has done some great work on it. Chenchus of Nallamalla, Bishnois, Soligas, Amur falcon conservation story in Nagaland, Dibang forest. These are all these photos taken, clouded leopards. These are all from community conserve forest that Sahil had taken. These are the Chenchus of Nallamalla hills. Just to quickly put that point, that Nallamalla hills, the entire landscape was the headquarters of the People's War Group, the most powerful Maoist group in southern India, for close to 30 years. And no forest department official dared go in. And it was all believed that all tigers and all wildlife would have been wiped off. People would have eaten everything up. When eventually the Maoists were routed from that area, and the first surveys were done, it was found that the wildlife had, there might have been few decline here and there, but on and whole, the wildlife was doing quite well. The tigers were there, all prey animals were there, and they were being sighted. This is a Bishnoi, a woman who is feeding a Chinkara fawn and her own baby. And so with the Solikas, the Chenchus, and now unfortunately the department wants to get them out first rather than sort of incorporating them. It is imperative to remember that Chenchus are small game hunters and medium game hunters. So it is not as if they were not hunting during the set period, or that they were they don't hunt wildlife. They do, but the offtake is so small, or it is so negligible, that it does not impact the overall population of wildlife so much so to cause extinction. A story which is not the same in other places. These are some success stories from, the Amur falcon success story, a lot of you would have read about. So this mass hunting and these...
Yes. Yeah, we are a little over time.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I'll just finish up in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So basically, all of this has called what is known as the empty forest syndrome, where an excellent wildlife habitat has no, wildlife anymore. A lot of you might ask, when I ask you what is the rarest animal for you in your state, and you would say, oh, a tiger or a leopard or some, rare species of wildlife. For me, for a person, wildlife in Odisha, for a person in Chhattisgarh, you would say the rarest animal is a cheetal or a sambar. I have not seen a cheetal outside a small tourism zone area in Betla in about 25 years. I have not seen a sambar in Jharkhand in 50 years. They're all gone. Everything has been eaten out. And when, gores are completely gone from Jharkhand, the bison Marias of Bastar with their, beautiful bison horns, there are no bisons in Bastar anymore. The bison horn Marias reuse their old horns. So, and when the prey base goes, obviously, unlike what happened in Panna or Sariska, where the predators selectively were gone, tigers selectively gone, here it is a complete collapse of the ecosystem. And, the prey base went first, and then the tiger started picking up cattle, and then they were poisoned off. And this is something that has been ignored. This collapses of ecological collapse that happened across East Central India has been ignored both by the conservationists as well as the rights group. And then there is another important aspect, a small point that I wanted to add, is that there is a very important problem that a lot of rights groups, I believe, in my opinion, have, is that they mistake forest conservation with wildlife conservation. Community conserved areas are great in terms of protecting the trees of that area, but until and unless you assess whether they are actually protecting the overall ecology of the area, is it so that they are only protecting the trees, the grasses are taken off, the palatable grasses are taken off, is it so that specific species of trees are being protected, others are being cut down, is it so that, you have to see all of that. Even if you tinker with one element of that overall ecology, the wildlife that is dependent on them will not thrive, in addition to the hunting pressure. So, and this is very ironically similar to what they protest against all the time, that is the monoculture plantations of forest department. They are dead ecosystems. Similarly, community conserved areas, no matter how lush and green and full of trees they look, if they are not enough, if they do not have the enough diversity and vitality, they cannot sustain wildlife populations. And so there is the challenge of, what are the challenges for the rights group, the conservationists, and how we can move forward. First, we have to put aside our ideological dogmas, both on both sides of the divide. So the rights groups perhaps need to stop romanticizing the tribals and the Adivasi groups as if, they can do no wrong. Hunting is not a problem. You have to acknowledge a problem. Until you acknowledge a problem, you can't resolve it. You can't mistake tree conservation for wildlife conservation. You have to understand the needs of wildlife ecology. So you have to engage with wildlife biologists, and you have to do it across the board, and not if, oh, they support me on my X position, so I will interact with only those biologists and not with others. So these things, we cannot believe the blind belief that community forest conservation leads to wildlife conservation is false, attestably false, as shown by empty forest. Then, in some cases, the adjustment might mean voluntary relocation from sensitive areas to create inviolate habitats. But obviously, that has to be done not only with under the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act, but also the provisions of FRA, which is very critical and something that departments don't do. Spatial honeycombing of forests, which is a problem across East Central India, forested hills, the valleys and fertile valleys and water sources completely taken up by agriculture, sometimes encroachment, sometimes illegal. It differs. Then, the ungulates have nothing to eat, they die out. And obviously they're hunted out as well. Similarly, for conservation, is the ideological dogma that any human presence for wildlife is bad. That is also not entirely correct. The lack of recognition of a forest department of genuine rights under FRA. Relocation from PA is a very important issue, a very touchy issue. One of the biggest things that is lacking with relocation right now is that no matter how well intentioned, no matter all said and done, if they are done without settling the forest rights, they are actually technically illegal. So you have to first, settle the rights under FRA, then you can, talk about relocating them from the forest. That is what the law mandates. And then there are obviously the poor track record in hand-holding forest dwellers after the communities that have been, villages that have been relocated. It is likely to dump them out of the forest and then forget about it. There are some exceptions to it in Bhadra, in Satpura, but they are far and few in between. Then there is a acute lack of understanding of Adivasi faith, traditions, their socio-cultural aspects, where they come from, there, then the problem of focusing on very few PAs, failure to organize, on-ground alliances with Adivasis on issues of diversion from lesser known PAs. And from on-ground, I mean, not just signing petitions, but like the rights group, like many, social activists going on the ground, standing, hand to hand with the people and, participating in their struggle. Similarly, problems of redressal of problems of the restrictions that have been created because of the creation of protected areas, be it the lack of access of roads, healthcare, education, how to read those things. The material utility of wildlife that we talked about earlier. Can we get to the community-led tourism? We are not talking of giving them the job of just a driver or a helper in a resort. Truly community-led tourism, some of the good examples that we have from Northeast India. And possibilities are that rights groups and forest conservationists, wildlife conservation, I often say that they are like two parallel rail tracks. They are going in the same direction, but they never meet. So I do think they can meet. They can be always contention, they can be disagreements, but we can still be allies in the larger struggle. And one of the very important points that I want to put across for the rights groups is that PAs, protected areas, are not always bad. Lands that are rich in megafauna and that are emblematic, smaller taxa, they are that much more difficult to denotify and divert than some empty forest where it can be easily signed off to any industry or mining firm or whatever you have. And new PAs as well as existing PAs can act as strong bulwark because they then give you the extra protection of Wildlife Protection Act. You have to go get the clearances not just from the forest advisory committees, but also from the State Wildlife Board, National Wildlife Board, and if the case is serious enough, from the Central and Part Committee, the Supreme Court. And as well as creation of conservation reserve, where you have, you need to actively pursue the creation of conservation reserves, because here the community has the the majority and the statutory stay in decision making of wildlife management of that area. And if and if we can get that done, then that also provides the cushion of, because it is a PA, so it also provides the cushion of Wildlife Protection Act, without, or at least while redressing some of the problems that a sanctuary or national park have in terms of strict restrictions of rights. And then, as I said, we need to support the groups on both each other. Adivasi groups need to support conservationists, and conservationists need to support Adivasi groups in their struggles on the ground. And I've spoken a lot, and I will stop now. I'm very sorry I've exceeded a lot of time.
Thank you, Raza, for that rather hard-hitting talk and putting forth some really important points forth. We've run a little over time, so Deepshika, do we have some time to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, I think we can take 2 or 3 questions. Remaining, probably we can mail it to you, Raza, and then maybe.
Yes, I'll just put in my email address. So in case any question is missed, you can just email.
Yeah.
That'll be very helpful. Thanks. So, okay. So one question in the chat box is from Manoj. And they say the cultural dimensions of tribes suggest a fearful respect towards the big cat, which is embedded in the rituals. Is this reinforcement of the latter's conflict potential, or a conscious prescription at coexistence?
So I would say that it is the former. It is not because of conscious prescription of coexistence as such. It is something that the fear of big cats is a generational fear that has been carried on from generation. Big cats prey on you, big cats prey on your cattle, they cause livelihood harm, they cause economic harm. So obviously your gods would always, when you say you fear God, that fear aspect of it was metamorphosed through the big cats, in the form of the big cat. So I think that is what it is. It is not something that has been created to create coexistence as such. It was something to propitiate what they thought was something which could harm.
Thank you, Raza. Thank you.
Mayuresh asks, were there any interactions between the Adivasis who worship tiger and poachers who kill tigers for money?
Sorry. Could you just repeat the question? I missed.
Yeah. Were there any interactions between Adivasis who worship the tiger and poachers who killed the tigers for money?
Oh, that is very interesting. I think same person can be both. This is something from my experience. A person can worship the tiger and yet also go ahead and hunt down a tiger. See, as I said, with time, the rules, the clan rules, all of those have diluted a lot. At the same time, Adivasis are very ingenious communities in the sense that if they do, unlike what a lot of us tend to believe, and a lot of even rights activists tend to parcel them as unchanging or set in their ways, they're not so. In fact, if you look at the literature of anthropology literature that exists on them, they have always changed their belief system and tradition according to the changing needs of the time. So, for example, when tigers were man-eaters back in the days, then they created and they had to kill tigers, but they were forbidden by the clan rules to kill the tiger. Then they would say ki, we'll kill the tiger and then offer two goats to the tiger god, and then that sort of balances it out. So it is not one or the other. A hunter who worships a deer could also go and hunt that very deer. Earlier, these things were different. 200 years ago, 300 years ago, when the clan rules were very strong, but now it is not so much.
Okay, thank you. One last quick question, and then we'll close and forward all the other questions to you, Raza, over email. Raza, sorry, over email. Sorry. So yeah, one last quick question. You made a difference between cohabit and coexist.
Yes.
So could you please explain what that difference is?
So basically the contention is, and the idea is that coexist and cohabit have, they sound similar, but they're slightly different. Cohabit basically means that there is a common resource pool, say the forest. You are using that forest for your needs. The human, the Adivasi or the forest dweller community is using it for his needs, and the wildlife is using it for its needs. They are both doing it independent of each other. One doesn't care what happens to the use of others. So the tiger does not care that if he kills the cattle, what happens to the economy or the livelihood of the poor Adivasi, and the Adivasi does not care that if he kills off the tiger, what happens to his material relationship with the forest. So that is what cohabitation is. And coexistence is when you are actually actively, looking out for the welfare of each other. Obviously, tigers cannot look out for your welfare, at least not consciously so, but humans can. Bishnoi, for example, is an example of coexistence because there is active, active steps taken to ensure that apart from using the common resource base that both wildlife and Bishnois are using, the Bishnois also ensure that the wildlife does well. So that is coexistence. And if it is like, say, for example, a hunter is, he worships a tiger god, but then again he goes ahead and hunts a tiger, then that is cohabitation, not coexistence.
Thank you. Thank you, Raza. So since we're short on time, we'll close this talk for now.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for joining.
And just a small thank you to I'm really thankful to all the people who, I got images from a lot of sources. Some of them I could quickly put in the slides with the copyright and details. Some of them I could not credit. I'm very sorry for that. Thank you so much for everybody. And also some of the places where they have not been blurred out is because they were provided, they are on the public domain, they are published literature, and so some of the faces, some of them have been, I don't know, but basically, and they're under copyright. whichever images that I got in a personal capacity that I have taken myself, I thought it is good to blur the faces, because I want to make a point and not sort of put people's images without their consent.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, so I guess with this, we come to the end of this talk. And thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Raza, for such an enlightening talk. And this was the last talk in the series Voices of Nature and Society, commemorating 25 years of Nature Conservation Foundation. And if you guys want to be updated about recordings of all the previous talks, please follow our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we'll soon post an update about all the recordings of these sessions. And Raza has written his email ID in the chat box. So if you guys want to ask any questions, you can directly write to him. And we'll also forward him all the questions that are already there in the chat box. So yeah, with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Raza. And yeah, have a good weekend, everyone.
Take care.